First contact and fatal assumption. High Admiral Zextal stood before the Kraxan Imperial Council, his iridescent scales gleaming under the chamber's crystalline lights. The massive holographic display behind him showed a small blue planet, unremarkable except for the primitive radio signals emanating from its surface. "Counselors, we have discovered another spacefaring species," Zextal announced, his tail swishing with barely contained excitement. "They call themselves humans, and their homeworld Earth exists in what they term the Sol system." The council chamber erupted in murmurs. First contact protocols were well established in the Empire. Assess, evaluate, and if the species proved worthy, offer them protectorate status under Kraxan guidance. If not, well, the Empire always needed more resources. "Tell us of their capabilities," Grand Counselor Naxvir commanded, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. Zextal's facial ridges flattened in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Primitive, honored ones. They have achieved spaceflight, yes, but using chemical rockets. Their weapons are mostly kinetic, projectiles propelled by chemical explosions. Their most powerful weapons are crude atomic devices, far inferior to our quantum arsenals." He gestured, and a hologram changed to show various human military vehicles, tanks, aircraft, ships. Their ground forces rely on these mechanical conveyances. No powered armor, no gravity manipulation, no energy weapons. They still fight wars amongst themselves over resources and territory. "Their population?" another counselor asked. "Approximately 8 billion. Their planet is resource-rich but inefficiently managed. They have barely begun to exploit their own system." Grand Counselor Naxvir's eyes narrowed. "And their response to our probe?" "They detected it, but could not prevent its scans. Their military forces attempted to intercept it, but their aircraft couldn't reach its altitude. They're broadcasting messages asking for peaceful contact." "Recommendations?" Zextal's ridges rippled with confidence. "They're too primitive for protectorate status, but their world would make an excellent mining colony. Their population could provide useful labor. I recommend immediate military action while they're still planet-bound. A single battle fleet should be sufficient." Objections? Naxvir looked around the chamber. None were raised. "Very well. Prepare the 47th Fleet. Standard conquest protocols." But in a small office deep within the Pentagon, General Sarah Chen was reviewing the alien probe's scan patterns with growing concern. Next to her, Dr. James Martinez pointed at his computer screen. "They focused almost entirely on our obvious military assets," he said. "Bases, aircraft, ships, armor. But they completely ignored our civilian infrastructure." Chen nodded grimly. "They think like empire builders. They're looking for what they consider threats. Did you notice how their scan patterns changed when they detected our nuclear facilities?" "Yes. Much more detailed analysis. They clearly consider that our peak technology, which means they've completely missed everything else." Chen pulled up another screen. "Our distributed manufacturing capabilities, our entire civilian drone industry, our chemical plants, our vast communications and logistics networks. Hell, they probably think our satellites are primitive because they're not weapons platforms." Martinez leaned back. "They're making assumptions based on their own technological development path. Classic mirror imaging." "Exactly." Chen started typing rapidly. "Get me the Joint Chiefs. If these aliens come in expecting an easy conquest, we need to be ready to give them one hell of a surprise. And contact our allies. We're going to need everyone on board for what I have in mind." 3 months later, High Admiral Zextal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. The 47th Fleet had emerged from hyperspace beyond the orbit of the human satellite they called the Moon. Nearly 1,000 ships, more than enough to subjugate such a primitive world. "Status of human defenses?" he asked. "They've detected us, Admiral. Their primitive craft are scrambling, but remain within their atmosphere. Their space assets appear to be civilian satellites only. No weapons platforms detected. Zextel's ridges rippled with satisfaction. This would be simple. Begin standard invasion sequence. Establish orbital superiority, then launch dropships with shock troops. Target their largest military installations first. Yes, Admiral. Deploying fighter screen now. But in underground command centers across Earth, men and women watched the alien fleet's formation with practiced eyes. General Chen's voice crackled across secure channels. All commands, Operation Trojan Horse is now in effect. I say again, Operation Trojan Horse is active. Good hunting, everyone. Show these aliens why you never pick a fight with humans on the ground. The trap was set. The Craxan Empire was about to learn some very expensive lessons about making assumptions and about how humans really wage war. The ground war begins. The first Craxan dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their heat shields glowing as they targeted military bases across the planet. High Admiral Zextel watched from orbit as the first wave of his invasion force deployed. The humans' primitive aircraft had retreated from their approaches, no doubt overwhelmed by the superior technology they faced. Commander Crix led his shock troops out of their dropship onto the abandoned airfield of what their intelligence identified as Ramstein Air Base in the region called Germany. His soldiers moved with practiced precision, their powered armor making them tower over the primitive human structures. Each trooper carried a plasma rifle that could reduce one of the humans' armored vehicles to slag. Perimeter secure, Commander, his second reported. No resistance detected. Their aircraft evacuated when we approached. Sensors show multiple human life signs in the underground portions of the base, but they appear to be hiding. Crix's mandibles clicked in amusement. As expected. Prepare to breach the underground sections. Remember, we want prisoners for labor camps. But in the command bunker below, Colonel Emma Weber smiled grimly as she watched the alien troops through hundreds of microscopic drones disguised as ordinary insects. The aliens had walked right into position. All units, execute, she said quietly into her comm. The attack came from everywhere at once. The abandoned aircraft hangars exploded outward as concealed demolition charges turned them into clouds of shrapnel. Hidden panels in the tarmac slid aside, revealing automated gun turrets that opened up with depleted uranium rounds specifically designed to penetrate the aliens' energy shields at close range. But the real surprise came from underground. The alien sensors had detected humans hiding in the bunkers, but they hadn't detected what was hiding with them. Dozens of small autonomous combat drones, each barely larger than a basketball, swarmed out of concealed tunnels. They moved with insect-like agility, carrying shake charges precisely calibrated to exploit weaknesses in the aliens' armor that had been identified during the probe incident. The Craxan troops found their sophisticated combat systems overwhelmed. Their sensors couldn't track all the small, fast-moving targets. Their energy shields, designed to stop plasma bolts and laser fire, struggled against the humans' hypervelocity kinetic weapons. Most importantly, they had never faced an enemy that attacked from so many directions at once with such coordination. Status report. Crix bellowed as another explosion claimed 3 of his soldiers. Where is the enemy? Unknown, Commander. Our sensors can't get clear locks. There's too much interference. These readings don't make sense. The attack patterns suggest hundreds of opponents, but we're not detecting any human life signs in the engagement zone. Similar scenes played out at military installations across the planet. The Craxan shock troops found themselves fighting enemies they couldn't see, their advanced technology constantly stymied by human ingenuity and preparation. When they did encounter human soldiers, they were never where expected. Instead of facing them head-on, the humans struck from hidden positions with weapons specifically designed to bypass Craxan defenses. In orbit, High Admiral Zextel's confidence began to waver as casualty reports flooded in from his landing forces. The humans weren't fighting according to any doctrine the Craxans had encountered before. They weren't trying to hold territory or engage in set-piece battles. Instead, they seemed to be following a carefully prepared plan to bleed the invasion force. Admiral. His tactical officer called out, "We're detecting massive electromagnetic pulses from multiple points on the planet's surface. They appear to be targeting our dropships during atmospheric entry. We've lost contact with 30% of our landing craft." Zextal's scales darkened with rage. Impossible. Their technology isn't sophisticated enough for such precise targeting. Order all remaining dropships to alter their entry corridors and... He was cut off by new alarms. Hundreds of small objects were rising from Earth's surface on ballistic trajectories. His sensors identified them as primitive chemical rockets, hardly a threat to his capital ships. But the rockets weren't targeting his ships. Instead, they detonated in the upper atmosphere, creating a cloud of debris directly in the path of his dropships. The seemingly primitive weapons had created a sophisticated orbital denial system, turning his carefully planned invasion corridors into death traps of hypersonic shrapnel. In her Pentagon office, General Chen watched the unfolding chaos with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 complete, she reported to the Joint Chiefs. The enemy has committed their forces exactly as predicted. Civilian casualties are minimal thanks to our evacuation protocols. Time to show them what happens when you mistake technological superiority for tactical supremacy. She turned to Dr. Martinez, who was coordinating with NASA and civilian space agencies. "Are we ready for Phase 2? He nodded, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "Civilian satellite network is repositioned as ordered. Our primitive communications infrastructure is about to become a weapon they never saw coming." "Good." Chen's eyes hardened as she watched more alien dropships burning up in the atmosphere. "Let's teach them why you never start a ground war with humanity without doing your homework first." Learning fear, High Admiral Zextal's scales had lost their luster, turning a dull gray as he reviewed the casualty reports. 7 days into what should have been a simple conquest, and everything was going wrong. He'd lost contact with over 60% of his ground forces, and the survivors were reporting increasingly desperate situations. "Play that last transmission again," he ordered, staring at the holographic display. A harried Craxan commander appeared, his armor scorched and damaged. "This is Commander Vex. We've lost control of the region designated Silicon Valley. The humans, they've done something to our communication systems. Our quantum-encrypted channels are being compromised somehow. They're using our own tactical networks against us. They've taken control of our autonomous units and..." The transmission dissolved into static. "How?" Zextal demanded of his staff. "How are these primitives hacking quantum encryption?" His chief technology officer's scales rippled with distress. "Unknown, Admiral. We're detecting massive computational activities across their planetary information network, but it's all running through their primitive binary systems. It shouldn't be possible, but somehow they're using distributed computing on a planetary scale." On Earth, in a secure facility beneath a nondescript office building in Mountain View, California, Dr. Lisa Wong allowed herself a small smile as another alien network fell to her team's attack. Around her, hundreds of programmers coordinated with AI systems that had been specifically designed to crack alien computer systems. "Their quantum encryption is impressive," she commented to her assistant, "but they never considered that we might approach the problem differently. They built their security assuming an attacker would need quantum computers to break it. They never imagined we'd find a way to do it with networked classical computing." Her screens showed the status of what the media had dubbed the Silicon Army, millions of civilian computers worldwide, volunteered by their owners, working together to break alien codes and take control of their autonomous systems. Every smartphone, laptop, and gaming console had become a weapon in humanity's digital arsenal. In orbit, the Craxan fleet was facing its own problems. What had seemed like primitive satellites were revealing themselves as components of a sophisticated orbital defense network. Civilian communications satellites suddenly demonstrated electronic warfare capabilities. Weather monitoring stations became targeting platforms. Even debris from humanity's early space exploration was being weaponized, deliberately shifted into new orbits to threaten Craxan ships. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, We're detecting new energy signatures from the planet's surface. They appear to be launching something. Zextal watched in disbelief as hundreds of new objects rose from Earth, but these weren't the primitive chemical rockets they'd seen before. These were sleek, efficient craft powered by engines that his sensors couldn't quite understand. "Impossible," he whispered. "They didn't have this technology. Our scans showed nothing like this." On the bridge of the first human space warship to break atmosphere, Colonel Sarah Martinez felt a fierce pride. The ships had been built in secret, deep underground, using a combination of reverse-engineered technology from the alien probe and humanity's own innovations. They weren't as advanced as the Kraxan vessels, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to get close enough. "All ships, execute Operation Trojan Horse Phase 3, she ordered. "Let's show them what happens when you give humanity 3 months to study your technology." The human ships didn't try to engage the Kraxan fleet directly. Instead, they launched thousands of small objects, simple shells containing a mixture of technologies that should never have worked together. Alien-derived shield technology combined with human electromagnetic pulse generators, quantum communicators paired with computer viruses, every piece designed to bypass Kraxan defenses by approaching problems in ways their rigid technological doctrine had never considered. Back in the Pentagon, General Chen watched the chaos unfold. "Status report on civilian casualties." "Minimal, ma'am," her aide replied. The evacuation protocols worked better than expected. Most population centers were emptied before the aliens could target them. "Our distributed manufacturing network is still at 90% capacity, and civilian morale is holding strong." Chen nodded. The aliens had expected to find easy targets, concentrated population centers, centralized manufacturing, conventional military forces. Instead, they'd found a civilization that had spent 3 months preparing for precisely this fight. Factories had been dispersed. Military assets had been hidden. Every piece of civilian infrastructure had been examined for its potential as a weapon. "They still don't understand, do they?" Dr. Martinez observed, watching the alien fleet's increasingly erratic movements. "They think this is just about military technology. They haven't realized that we're not just fighting them with our weapons." "No," Chen agreed. "They haven't figured out that we're fighting them with everything. Every civilian computer, every factory, every piece of infrastructure. We've turned our entire civilization into a weapon." She watched as another wave of human ships rose from hidden launch sites, and we're just getting started. The tide turns. High Admiral Zextal's flagship shuddered as another human attack penetrated their defenses. His bridge crew worked frantically to maintain control of systems that were increasingly unreliable. The mighty 47th Fleet, pride of the Kraxan Empire, was being systematically dismantled by what they had dismissed as a primitive species. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice cracked with strain, "we've lost contact with all ground forces in the regions they call Asia and Europe. Our remaining units in North America are reporting that the humans have begun deploying something new." The tactical display showed the last transmissions from his ground forces. What he saw made his scales pale to almost white. The humans had begun fielding their own powered armor units, crude by Kraxan standards, but horrifyingly effective. They combined stolen Kraxan technology with human innovations in ways that should have been impossible. But it wasn't just the technology that was causing his forces to fail. It was how the humans used it. They never engaged in straightforward battles. Every confrontation was an ambush, every retreat a trap, every surrender a deception. They had turned their entire planet into a weapon. In a converted auto manufacturing plant in Detroit, Dr. Sarah Chen, sister to the general, watched as the latest batch of hybrid combat units rolled off the production line. What had once made electric cars now produced weapons of war, combining human engineering with reverse-engineered alien tech. "How's the neural interface holding up?" she asked her team leader. "Better than expected," he replied, watching as test pilots put the new units through their paces. Turns out our experience with video game controllers and VR systems made it easier for our pilots to adapt. The aliens built their interfaces assuming certain neural structures. We just redesigned them to work with human brains. The facility wasn't just producing combat units. Every major manufacturing center on Earth had been repurposed, creating a distributed production network that the aliens couldn't effectively target. Car factories made combat vehicles. Electronics plants produced warfare systems. Chemical plants synthesized new weapons. Above the Earth, Colonel Martinez's space fleet had grown. What had started as a few hundred ships was now thousands, as hidden launch facilities continued to send up vessels that combined human ingenuity with stolen alien technology. The Craxan fleet found itself fighting an enemy that learned and adapted with terrifying speed. They're retreating from lunar orbit, Martinez reported to General Chen. Our hybrid drives are working better than expected. They can't predict our movement patterns because we're not using their standard tactical doctrines. Chen nodded, studying the holographic display that showed the state of the battle. The aliens had expected a straightforward military confrontation. Instead, they'd found themselves fighting an entire civilization that had turned everything. Every computer, every factory, every piece of infrastructure, into a weapon. New development, Dr. Martinez called out from his station. Our distributed quantum computing network just cracked another layer of their encryption. We now have access to their fleet's primary command and control systems. Chen's eyes narrowed. Can we use it? Better than that. We can transmit to every ship in their fleet simultaneously, including their personal communication devices. A slow smile spread across Chen's face. Patch me in. It's time to make them an offer. Throughout the Craxan fleet, on every ship and in every soldier's combat armor, a human voice suddenly spoke in perfect Craxan language. This is General Sarah Chen of Earth's Combined Defense Forces. Your invasion has failed. You've lost over 60% of your ground forces and 40% of your fleet. We are now capable of disabling your remaining ships at will. You have two options: immediate withdrawal or complete defeat. You have 30 minutes to decide. The message repeated, impossible to block or ignore. In his flagship, Admiral Zextal stared at the tactical display in despair. His mighty fleet was in ruins, his ground forces scattered or captured. And now the humans had control of his communications. How? He whispered. How did they advance so far so quickly? His science officer, who had been analyzing the human tactics, finally spoke up. Sir, I believe I understand their advantage. We assumed their technological development would mirror our own, but they took a different path. Where we focused on perfecting single solutions, they created countless parallel options. Where we sought elegance, they embraced improvisation. Every time we destroyed one of their capabilities, they had 3 more ready to replace it. Zextal looked at the blue-green planet that had destroyed his fleet. The humans had seemed so primitive, so easy to conquer. Instead, they had demonstrated a type of warfare his people had never imagined, one where an entire civilization became a weapon, where every civilian technology could be repurposed for combat, where adaptation and improvisation trumped raw technological superiority. As his command staff waited for his decision, Zextal realized that this defeat would change the galaxy forever. The Craxan Empire had not just failed to conquer Earth, they had awakened something far more dangerous: humanity's full potential. Never again. 1 year after the failed invasion of Earth, High Admiral Zextal, now stripped of his rank, stood before the Craxan Imperial Council once again. This time, he wasn't delivering a report on a promising conquest. He was explaining the greatest military disaster in Imperial history. The humans have refused our offer of surrender, he said, his once proud scales now permanently dulled with shame. They don't want our territory. They don't want reparations. They demand only 2 things: recognition of Earth's independence and the right to send diplomatic observers to our worlds. The council chamber, once so magnificent, felt cold and diminished. The Empire's defeat at Earth had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Other subjugated species were beginning to question their overlords. The myth of Craxan invincibility had been shattered. "Tell us," Grand Counselor Naxver's voice wavered with age and worry. "What did we truly lose on Earth?" Zextal activated a holographic display showing the aftermath of the failed invasion. 47% of our fleet destroyed. Another 30% captured by the humans. Over 70% of our ground forces lost. But far worse than the military defeat was what the humans learned from us. The display showed human ships now patrolling their solar system. Vessels that combined Craxan technology with innovations that the Empire's engineers were still struggling to understand. Earth's orbital defenses had been enhanced with hybrid technologies that made them virtually impregnable. "They took our technology and improved it in ways we never considered," Zextal continued. "But more importantly, they showed the galaxy a new way of warfare. They proved that a unified civilization, properly prepared and willing to adapt, could defeat a technologically superior force." In her office at the newly established Earth Defense Force headquarters, General Chen reviewed the latest reports from the diplomatic mission to the Craxan homeworld. Next to her, Dr. Martinez analyzed data from the reverse engineering projects that were revolutionizing human technology. "The Craxans still don't understand what really happened, do they?" Martins mused. "They think it was just about the technology." Chen shook her head. "No, they don't get it. They see our ships, our weapons, our defenses. They don't understand that our real strength was never about hardware. It was about how we think, how we adapt, how we turn everything we have into an advantage." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's new defense network. Every satellite now doubled as a weapons platform. Every civilian communication system could become a military asset. Every factory could switch to war production within hours. But most importantly, the entire human race had learned to work together in ways they never had before. "The Craxans made us stronger," she said, "not just technologically, but as a species. We proved that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our tools or our technology. It's our ability to unite and adapt when threatened." The display shifted to show the broader galaxy, where other species were beginning to take notice of humanity. Some with fear, others with hope. Earth had become a symbol, proof that even the mightiest empire could be defeated by a determined and innovative opponent. "We're receiving more requests for diplomatic contact," Martins reported, "not just from the Empire's subject worlds. Other spacefaring races want to open relations with Earth. They're calling us the great innovators now." Chen smiled. "And the defense contractors, converting back to civilian production, but keeping the capability to switch if needed. The distributed manufacturing network is being maintained. Every new civilian technology is being examined for potential defensive applications. We're calling it the Silent Shield Doctrine." In orbit, Earth's new defense fleet conducted training exercises. The ships looked nothing like their Craxan counterparts. They were hybrid creations that reflected humanity's unique approach to space warfare. Each vessel incorporated multiple redundant systems, the ability to operate independently or as part of a swarm, and weapons that could adapt to almost any threat. But the real changes were happening on Earth itself. The invasion had taught humanity invaluable lessons about unity, adaptation, and preparedness. Every new technology was developed with both civilian and military applications in mind. Every infrastructure project incorporated defensive capabilities. Every scientific breakthrough was examined for its potential to protect Earth. In the Craxan Imperial Archives, a new warning was added to the classified records. Earth is not to be approached with hostile intent. The humans do not think like other species. They do not fight like other species. They turn their entire civilization into a weapon. They adapt. They improvise. They overcome. And most dangerously, they learn from their enemies. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. Technological superiority means nothing against an enemy who can turn your own strengths against you. The humans hadn't just defeated an invasion. They had changed the fundamental nature of warfare in the galaxy forever. And in the depths of space, other empires and species watched Earth with growing interest, wondering what these innovative, adaptable, and surprisingly dangerous humans would do next.